The French Revolution. On the morning of 14 July 1789, the city of Paris was in a state of alarm. The king had commanded troops to move into the city. Rumors spread that he would soon order the army to open fire upon the citizens. Some 7,000 men and women gathered in front of the town hall and decided to form a people's militia. They broke into a number of government buildings in search of arms. What happened on the morning of 14 July 1789? In the city of Paris, the city was in a state of alarm. Something was going to happen. It was that the king had commanded troops, the military troops, to move into the city, to come into the city. And also rumors spread. What are rumors? Rumors are afwahein. Rumors spread that the king would soon order the army to open fire upon whom? Upon the citizens, the common people. Now, after listening to these rumors, what did men and women, common people do? Nearly 7,000 men and women gathered in front of the town hall and decided to form a people's militia. Now, even common people wanted to be ready and fight. They broke into a number of government buildings. Who are they here? They are the common people. 7,000 men and women, they broke into a number of government buildings in search of arms. In search of arms means they wanted the ammunition, the different weapons that were kept in the buildings. They wanted to take it to fight. Finally, a group of several hundred people marched towards the eastern part of the city and stormed the fortress prison, the Bastille, where they hoped to find hoarded ammunition. What did the people finally do? Nearly a group of 700 people marched towards the eastern part of the city. Okay? Why did they march? They wanted the ammunition. And where was it kept? In the prison, in the fortress prison. What is fortress prison? A fort-like structure, a fort-like building, and it was a prison, and in that prison hoarded ammunition, that is the ammunition that was kept. The fortress prison, the Bastille, where the ammunition was hoarded, where the ammunition was kept. In the armed fight that followed, the commander of the Bastille was killed and the prisoners released, though there were only 7 of them. Now, how many prisoners were there? 7 prisoners were there. Now, in the armed fight that followed, after that, people actually fought with the troops, and the commander of the Bastille was killed. Who was killed? The commander of the Bastille was killed, and in return what happened? The prisoners were released. The 7 prisoners were released. Yet the Bastille was hated by all because it stood for the despotic power of the king. The Bastille was hated. Why was it hated? Because the fort, the building, the prison, it was a symbol of despotic power. What is despotic power? A power that is cruel power, the cruel power of the king. The fortress was demolished and its stone fragments were sold in the markets to all those who wished to keep a souvenir of its destruction. The fortress was totally demolished, destroyed, and the fragments, the parts made up of stone were sold in the markets to all those who wished to keep a souvenir, those who wanted to keep the parts as souvenir. What is souvenir? Something reminding of a place. Now, the parts of the pastille were kept to just remind of the prison. The days that followed saw more rioting both in Paris and the countryside. Most people were protesting against the high price of bread. Much later, when historians looked back upon this time, they saw it as the beginning of a chain of events that ultimately led to the execution of the king in France. Though most people at the time did not anticipate this outcome. How and why did this happen? Now, after this event, the days followed saw more rioting. What is rioting? Rioting is violent disturbance in crowd of people. They do violent activities like fighting, attacking, killing, and these activities took place both in Paris and the countryside, and most people were protesting against the high price of bread. The prices of bread were increasing, people were protesting, people were opposing. Much later, when historians looked back upon this time, they saw it as the beginning of chain of events that ultimately led to the execution of the king in France. What is execution? Execution is killing as punishment. Who was killed? Who was executed? The king of France. Though most people at the time did not anticipate this outcome. Anticipate is did not expected that the king will be killed. French society during the late 18th century. In 1774, Louis XVI of the Bourbon family of kings ascended the throne of France. What is ascended? Ascended is to go to more powerful position. Now, this King Louis in 1774 ascended means he attained a powerful position. He became the king. He was 20 years old and married to the Austrian princess Marie Antoinette. Upon his accession, the new king found an empty treasury. What was the condition of the treasury? It was empty. Long years of war had drained the financial resources of France. First reason for the empty treasury is long years of war. Whenever a war takes place, the financial resources of the country, they are affected. That is why this was the first reason why the treasury was empty. Added to this was the cost of maintaining an extravagant court at the immense palace of Versailles. Now, second reason was maintenance cost of extravagant. Extravagant means uncontrollable, that had no control. Okay, and under Louis XVI, France helped the 13 American colonies to gain their independence from the common enemy, Britain. The war added more than $1 billion to a debt that had already risen to more than $2 billion. Okay, the third reason was France helped 13 American colonies to gain their independence from the common enemy. Who was the common enemy? Britain. So, in this help, the war added more than $1 billion to a debt. Lenders who gave the state credit now began to charge 10% interest on loans. So, the French government was obliged to spend an increasing percentage of its budget on interest payments alone. Now, fourth reason, lenders who gave the state credit. France took loan and France had to pay interest on the loans. So French government was obliged to spend an increasing percentage of its budget on interest payments alone. What is obliged? Forced by law. To meet its regular expenses such as the cost of maintaining an army, the court, running government offices or universities, the state was forced to increase taxes. Yet even this measure would not have sufficed. French society in the 18th century was divided into 3 estates and only members of the 3rd estate paid taxes. So to meet its regular expenses, the tax payment was made compulsory, but only who paid the tax? Who paid the taxes? Only the 3rd estate paid the taxes, and so that was not sufficient. The Society of Estates was part of the feudal system. Now, what is feudal system? Feudal system is a social system in Europe which the people worked and fought for the nobles who gave them protection and use of land in return. People got land from the nobles. The land was given to the people, and in return they had to fight. The Society of Estates was part of the feudal system that dated back to the Middle Ages. The term old regime is usually used to describe the society and institutions of France before 1789. What is regime? What is a regime? A government and authoritarian, favoring strict obedience to authority at the cost of personal freedom. What is regime? The freedom of the people was not given to them, and they had to follow, they had to obey the king. So in this condition, how was the system? It was a feudal system, and it was the old regime, that is, people did not enjoy the freedom. Figure 2 shows how the system of estates in French society was organized. Peasants made up about 90% of the population. However, only a small number of them owned the land they cultivated. Means people worked, but very few of them owned the land. They worked on the lands owned by other people. About 60% of the land was owned by the nobles, the church, and other richer members of the 3rd estate. We can see in the figure, 1st estate was the clergy, 2nd estate nobility, 3rd estate big businessmen, merchants, court officials, lawyers, etc., peasants and artisans, small peasants, landless labor, servants. So these peasants, these farmers worked, but they did not own the land. The members of the first 2 estates, that is the clergy and the nobility, enjoyed certain privileges by birth. The most important of these was exemption from paying taxes to the state. Now you can see the members of the first 2 estates, that is clergy and the nobility. These 2 classes, they were exempted, means it was allowed for them that they can avoid paying the taxes. They were not supposed to pay the taxes. The most important of this was exemption from paying taxes to the state. The nobles further enjoyed feudal privileges. What are privileges? Yes, privileges are special rights. These rights were only for the What were these special rights? These included feudal dues, which they extracted from the peasants. Peasants were obliged to render services to the lord, to work in his house and fields, to serve in the army, or to participate in building roads. So these are the feudal privileges given here. I repeat, these feudal privileges, these special rights included feudal dues. That is, feudal dues are compulsory payments these peasants they had to make to the nobles. Also, they were obliged, it was a law, to render services, to give services to the lord. What were the services? To work in house and fields, to serve in the army, or to participate in building roads. The church too extracted its share of taxes called tithes from the peasants, and finally all members of the third estate had to pay taxes to the state. So again and again here it is mentioned that only the third estate was supposed to pay the taxes. These included a direct tax called tally and a number of indirect taxes which were levied on articles of everyday consumption like salt or tobacco. It means if you go to buy these products, you have to pay the taxes, and this was compulsory only for the third estate. The burden of financing activities of the state through taxes was borne by the third estate alone. So it means all the burden, the whole burden of financing activities of the state, of the government, was only borne by the third estate. Now, so far we have seen in this topic French society during the late 18th century. How was the French society? What was the condition of the society? Like we saw how Louis XVI, he sat on the throne, and what was the condition of the treasury? It was empty. A lot of interest was to be paid on the loan. All these points we saw, and then how the society was divided into three estates: first, second and third. First, second, clergy and nobility, they were not supposed to pay the taxes. Only the third estate had to bear the different types of taxes. Now we see the struggle to survive. The population of France rose from about 23 million in 1715 to 28 million in 1789. This led to a rapid increase in the demand for food grains. As the population rose, people started demanding more and more food grains. Production of grains could not keep pace, could not keep speed with the demand. Population was increasing, but the production of food grains was not able to increase at that speed. So the price of bread, which was the staple diet of the majority, rose rapidly. So as a result, demand increased, production was not able to satisfy the demand. As a result, what increased? The price of bread increased, and bread was the staple diet of the majority of the people. Staple diet means bread was eaten daily. It was the basic diet. It was the main part of the meal. Most workers were employed as laborers in workshops whose owner fixed their wages, but wages did not keep pace with the rise in prices. Now see what happened. The workers who worked in workshops, their wages were fixed. Fixed means they did not increase. The prices of bread increased, but the wages did not increase. The wages did not keep speed with the rise in prices. So the gap between the poor and the rich widened. So the gap between the poor people and the rich people became big. Things became worse whenever a drought or hail reduced the harvest. Drought or hail. What is drought? Drought is the condition when people feel when people experience scarcity of water, very little water is there or no water is there. And what is hail? Hail is nothing but balls or frozen rain. Okay, so when rain falls in the form of ice, it destroys the crops. And when there is no water, when there is drought, in absence of water, crops cannot be grown. So in both these conditions, when there is no water and when there is hail, what happens? The harvest is affected. Crops are affected. So already population is increasing, prices of bread are increasing, and wages paid to the laborers were very low. In this condition, again, when the crops cannot grow properly because of drought and hail, the conditions became worst. This led to a subsistence crisis, something that occurred frequently in France during the old regime. So now here subsistence crisis is, the meaning is given here, an extreme situation where the basic means of livelihood are endangered. Means a situation where basic means of livelihood means what do we need to live? We need food to live. The basic need is food. Even that is endangered, means it becomes very difficult to satisfy the need of food. So now we go to the next topic. A growing middle class envisages an end to privileges. Now here we understand the meaning of the word envisages. Already we know what is meant by privileges. Privileges are special rights. A growing middle class. Middle class is a group of people, a name given to group of people. Now they are growing in number and they envisage. What is meant by envisage? Envisage, to picture something in one's mind, to create a picture, to think about something in your mind. So growing middle class is thinking about something, and what is it? End to privileges, end to the special rights given to the nobles. So let us see how this middle class brought a new idea. In the past, peasants and workers had participated in revolts against increasing taxes and food scarcity. What are revolts? Revolts are violent actions by people. See, people become poor, they cannot buy bread, so they become restless, sometimes because of hunger and because of so many problems in their life. They start becoming violent, so they start getting into revolts against increasing taxes and food scarcity. Already they have to pay so many taxes, and also they faced food scarcity. What is food scarcity? Lack of food. They don't get sufficient food, they have to remain hungry. Okay, but they lacked the means and programs to carry out full-scale measures that would bring about a change in the social and economic order. What did they lack? They did not have what? The means and programs to carry out full-scale measures, something that can be bring about a change in the social and economic order. They were understanding that this is not good. They had to pay so many taxes, they are remaining hungry, the prices of bread are increasing, their salary, wages are not increasing, but they had nothing to do. They were unable to bring about change in this social and economic order. This was left to those groups within the third estate who had become prosperous and had access to education and new ideas. See, very wonderful sentence. This finding out a way to change the society, to change the economic condition, was to those groups within the third estate. There were people in the third estate who had become prosperous. They are becoming famous. They were becoming famous. They had access to education. They were educating themselves. They were learning newer and newer ideas. The 18th century witnessed the emergence of social groups termed the middle class. A new class of people, group of people developed, emerged, came into existence, who earned their wealth through an expanding overseas trade and from the manufacture of goods such as woolen and silk textiles that were either exported or bought by the richer members of society. Now this middle class came into existence, and they manufactured goods such as woolen and silk textiles, and they got money as it was exported and also maybe bought by rich members of the society. And other way was, how did they earn the wealth? Through an expanding overseas trade. In addition to merchants and manufacturers, the third estate included professions such as lawyers or administrative officials. Along with merchants and manufacturers who were there in the third estate, they were the professions such as lawyers or administrative officials, those who worked in the offices. All of these were educated and believed that no group in society should be privileged by birth. They were educated, and now they understood that no group of people in the society should have special rights by birth. Rather, a person's social position must depend on his merit. His merit is a good quality or feature that deserves to be praised. Means if a person is doing something good, then only he should given a social position. These ideas envisaging a society based on freedom and equal laws and opportunities for all were put forward by philosophers such as John Locke and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. So now these ideas, like of a new society which was based on freedom, equal laws and opportunities for all, these all ideas were put forward by philosophers. These names are given, you have to remember: John Locke and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. In his two treatises of government, Locke sought to refute the doctrine of the divine and absolute right of the monarch. Now in his book, Locke has mentioned, he proved the doctrine of divine and absolute right of the monarch. Okay. Rousseau carried the idea forward, proposing a form of government based on a social contract between people and their representatives. Also, Rousseau brought a new idea. He brought the idea of a government which was based on a social contract between people and their representatives. The people had their leaders. In the spirit of the laws, Montesquieu proposed a division of power within the government between the legislative, executive and the judiciary. Now these different ideas were brought by these different philosophers. This model of government was put into force in the USA after the 13 colonies declared their independence from Britain. The American Constitution and its guarantee of individual rights was an important example for political thinkers in France. Now France started getting ideas from the American Constitution and its guarantee of individual rights. The Constitution guaranteed, the Constitution assured what? Individual rights. Each and every individual should get different rights. And this was an important example for political thinkers in France. The ideas of these philosophers were discussed intensively in saloons and coffee houses and spread among people through books and newspapers. See, how was the condition? These ideas rapidly spread. These were frequently read aloud in groups for the benefit of those who could not read and write. Even those people who were unable to read and write, some Nobody else used to read for them. The news that Louis XVI planned to impose further taxes to be able to meet the expenses of the state generated anger and protest against the system of privileges. What developed anger and protest? What generated anger and protest against the system of privileges? The news that came that Louis XVI was planning to impose further taxes on the third estate. So because of this news also, people were angry and they wanted to protest against the system of privileges, the system of special rights.